My name is Julia De Silva, Programs and Scholarships Associate with Triangle Community Foundation. Joining me today is my colleague Tanaya Suddreth Lynch, Program Officer. Thank you for joining us for episode 2 of our new podcast. Today we're going to talk about nonprofits led by and serving communities of color, what work they're doing, why their work is important, why they need our dollars, and how their organization and their clients are being especially impacted by COVID-19. We have a great group to give us the perspective on leading nonprofits as people of color and serving primarily people of color, as well as the funder perspective on prioritizing support to these organizations.
So as Julia said, today we have a great panel joining us, so I'll take a moment and let each of them introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Monica Daye. I'm the Executive Director of Stand Up Speak Out of North Carolina. We work with children who witness domestic violence and sexual abuse.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Zagabayou. I'm the Executive Director of Student U in Durham. We work with 550 students, their families, and educators in Durham, starting in 6th grade through college graduation. Thank you so much for having us today.
Hi, I'm Stacey, Donoghue, co-founder and Executive Director of StrongHER Together. We're in Durham and we're busy teaching girls to stick together no matter how different they are. And thank you again also for having us.
Great. I'm Valerie Stewart with the Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina Foundation and also a member of the Triangle Capacity Building Network.
But I really want to ask some questions focused on the challenges that you all have faced. And, you know, having spoken with you all before recording this podcast, I know that you all expressed some different experiences with your organizations based on your individual identities, your experiences in this organization or others, right? And so thinking about how it's important for folks to hear about your challenges in the organization where you are now. So Monica, I'm going to ask you to go first again.
So getting the organization off the ground, the experience, we don't have enough time for that today, but I'm going to do this in the short version. As I mentioned, I'm the founder. So 2004 up until 2010, it was, again, just very grassroots, going out, doing demonstrations, having the candlelight visuals, bringing awareness to domestic violence and sexual abuse, not just towards women, but the impact that children who witness that abuse. Using different forms of art, whether it was dance or poetry, music, any form of art to help people just kind of bring awareness. So I feel like those years was kind of laying the brick down and laying the foundation down. But the experience when I transitioned from being the community's known spoken word artist who always had this calling, I feel like, on my life to do work that was related to survivors. All of my poetry, if you ever heard, was centered around domestic violence, women's issues, things like that. But I feel like the first challenge was it was hard for people to separate the poet from now this founder and ED that wants to do this great work, right? So that was challenging. But as I began to continue to move into the work that I knew that I wanted to do, which was centered around working with children, the experience of becoming that 501c3, once that happened, that was the easy work. And I tell people that all the time. Once you get your paperwork, that's easy. It's the work that comes after that. And it was a challenge because Stand Up Speak Out, had been around for a while doing grassroots work. But now that change was, we wanted to show and offer our programs to the community with no money whatsoever, with community folks backing me as an individual, but backing one person and backing an organization is completely different. So I spent a lot of time studying on my own. I spent a lot of time connecting with people. Who did I need to know? Making a list, if you will, of I need to know that person, I need to know that person, I need to figure out how to get get a meeting with these different people so that I can share our mission, our work, our vision. What I didn't know, because it is often people tell you once you get your 501c3, it's going to be easy. The money is coming from all different places. We can all shake our
that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I need to meet that person. They lied.
I want to know which organization they started, right? Oh, they would tell, oh, Monica, the money is going to come. You could apply for all types of grants. That was the first like smack in the face. Like, no, that's not how it works. And that I was going to have to put in work, like more work than I had put in before. And so this is where that creative side of me was like, okay, I was writing grants. I was putting our mission and work out there. It was like, I'm denied left and right. This isn't working. Mind you, I'm a founder, so I didn't have the knowledge that maybe someone else being an ED that had done this work previously. So I'm having to learn kind of in some situations, like as I go. And so I learned very early on that that wasn't going to happen. And Monica, no one was going to give you any money. You was going to have to prove the work that you were doing was valuable and that it was needed in this community. And as a survivor, I'm also very resilient. And I use that resilience as a way to say, you know what, I can get denied 1,000,000 times. I'm not going to give up because in my heart, I believe in this work. This organization is built on the programs and services that I didn't have as an 11-year-old who was raped at a church convention. And all of what I experienced that came after that. So these programs my mom searched for, my parents searched for, the mentorships that was just not equipped to deal with a young girl who had experienced that trauma. Stand Up, Speak Out's programs are centered and built around that. So it's in my heart that it was like, I can't give up. I have to figure out, how do I build this? How do I make this visible? How do I get people to believe in this organization? And from 2015, that's exactly what I did. So to give you a story, I stayed home with my first son, he was born in 2012. So I was home, being stay-at-home mom, searching for who I needed to connect with, sending emails, having meetings by phone, whatever I needed to do. 2015, we got our paperwork in order, became a 501c3, realized very early on I wasn't getting any funding, no grants, any of that was happening, had to get creative. 2016, here I am. I'm having, my second son. And I'm like, how is this going to work? How am I going to have these meetings, right? How is this going to work? Well, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram became my closest friends. And that is how we became very visible. I used and maximized social media to begin to bring awareness. I began to lay out a plan of on social media. This is when I'm posting here on Twitter. This is what I'm posting. I laid out a complete plan, and I just began to make us visible to the community, sharing who we are, what we wanted to do. And that's really where the visibility began. People began to see, who's Stand Up, Speak Out? Like after a while, I was like, who are these people that keep posting? What? This is interesting stuff, but who are they? And then so from there, I began to use my creativity. And so that's where as I mentioned earlier, I wrote a stage play called Purple Freedom. And it was to highlight the stories of teen dating violence, domestic violence within the church setting, the impact of bullying, and all the different things that we see that we're always talking about. But this was in a creative way to bring people together, to see poets talk about it, poetry, dance, music, and theatrical art, in this theatrical production. So with all of that, again, that is what jump-started our budget, which helped us begin to bring our programs together. But it was a lot of work, a lot of sleepless nights, which I still have sleepless nights. I do. A lot of sleepless nights, a lot of putting in countless hours of saying, I'm doing this for the little girl in me that didn't have the services, but I'm doing it for all the little girls that I know that are experiencing or have experienced some form of abuse that have never even said that they're a survivor. And so those countless hours of putting in work eventually began to pay off. 2017, we launched the Purple Freedom. We debuted it in March, and we sold it out that first time. I have never written a play before, never. So I was stepped out on faith. We sold it out the first time. We also sold it out again in November. And that really changed the dynamics, because not only were we doing a stage play that was like, hey, come and see this play, right? These artists that are here, but come and hear about the seriousness of domestic violence and why Stand Up, Speak Out should exist. So 2017, that happened. 2018, we launched our summer camp programs. Actually, we launched our summer camp program in 2017, that same year. We continued to launch our programs in 2017, and it just continued to grow. So when we first put our summer camp out and we had 45 girls that was registered, I knew then, I was like, this is the first time we've ever done this. Like, clearly there's a need for what we're doing. And then the second year, we had 57, 60-some girls register for our camp. I knew that, this is needed. And when we checked our surveys and checking in with parents, I said, this wasn't enough. Can you work with them during the year? And I'm like, well, yeah, we should be working with them more, right? Providing that. And that's where our mentorship kind of came into place, because these young girls not only needed this during the summer, but they needed something during the year when they were back in school. So we continued to kind of do the work. And at that point, I think one of the big things that really helped me was I attended Unity Fellows. And when I attended Unity Fellows, which is a intensive workshop training for executive directors, I began to learn more about what it was going to take for me to take Stand Up, Speak Out to the next level. By this time, we were visible to the community. We had put out the play. We had done summer camps. We had some of the community backing us. But what we didn't have was we did not have the finances to help us with this growing need that we were putting out. And I feel like that is where that's where things begin to shift. I have gone from, we do have now 2 staff. So in that period of time, we do have 2 staff, myself and one other person that I have been able to bring on as paid staff. Most of the other people that work with us is about 12 of us, and they are interns and volunteers. But our organization now with COVID, we've been growing, but now even more, we have a greater need. And that is, there are children that's been in isolation who are witnessing abuse, who are victims of abuse. And when you talk about the long haul, like what this is going to look like, we have not missed a beat during COVID. We have gone strictly into doing our Zoom and our sessions with young people. But we know that we're up against even more as things begin to change, the world begins to open back up. Our young people are experiencing a lot anyway, and this is even heightened the anxiety and depression and all that they experience. So our work is even more so needed as we move forward. So now the community says, yeah, we're needed. Not only are we needed because we deal with domestic violence and sexual abuse as survivors, but we're needed because we use a different approach, a holistic approach, but also using that art therapy component that helps young people that typically would not talk in a counseling session. But if we use paint and a canvas and poetry and art and dance, we give them an outlet and a way to express themselves that otherwise they may not be comfortable in sharing what they have experienced.
Thank you so much, Monica, for sharing that. As Alex mentioned earlier, I can't wait till we're able to safely gather and maybe participate in some way in some of those productions, or it just sounds like a really special experience that you're providing these young people. And thank you for sharing about your challenges as well.
Yes, Monica, wow. You have such a beautiful voice for your program. You really do. It kind of made me forget everything I'm supposed to talk about. So I'll do my best. But as I mentioned, StrongHER Together is a bit younger than Stand Up, Speak Out and Student U. But what I wanted to share with everyone today was our journey in putting our leadership development team together and aligning that with the community. I really think the best way to start that talk is just to say, that I believe all of us in the community as a whole are going to be in the best position to realize the full potential of a nonprofit's impact if the leadership of the nonprofit adequately represents the community that it serves. Okay, so what we've tried to do since our earliest days is to build our leadership team with an intentional effort to balance people of color leadership with people of color families that we serve. So, for example, in our case, we serve families who are 75% people of color. However, our leadership team is 58% people of color. So they're decent numbers, but we've got some work to do, and we know that. But I guess my point is that we're trying to be deliberate about building the culture of our team based not only on the skills and the expertise that we need to support our program, but also on this fit that we need between our leaders and our families. And there's a couple of reasons why we believe that intentional effort is really, really important. Number one, it strengthens community connection. So people of color leaders are going to relate to people of color families in ways that leaders who are white just can't, right? And that ability to connect is going to result in a comfort and a trust with families that we serve, which is going to just build stronger ties. But the second reason I think that this alignment is important is because people of color leadership within a respective program can be a point of pride for people of color in the community. And if you just step back and look at that for a second, I mean, being proud of something can lead to a great many things, you know? If you're proud of something, you want to be involved with it. If you're proud of something, you want to tell people about it. If you're proud of something, you're excited about it. And most of all, if you're proud of it, then you're receptive to the change or the growth or the mission that's being advocated by the nonprofit, right? So in our case, you know, we want to see a shift in how girls relate to one another, right? And we want to show girls how this shift can impact our journey to equity. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's everything, right? So yes, we work really hard to be intentional about the leadership team we're building today. But likewise, we also try to take that same mentality as we look at our succession planning. So in other words, when it's my moment to pass the baton, my great hope is that I'll be passing it to a woman of color, right? It's just the kind of thing that I've always been really forthcoming about in conversations. As I've had opportunities to learn from all of you and to sit in some of our sessions together, what's clear to me is, you know, do I have worries as a founder of this program about being succeeded by a woman of color? And the short answer is yes, I do. And it's for a lot of the things that Monica just alluded to, a lot of the struggles. You know, I'm thankful for this opportunity that we have to talk more openly about the distinct advantage that a white leader has as opposed to a person of color. They have the connections, they have the networking opportunities with the funders and the donors who are often predominantly white, right? So as you can imagine, this is a huge and daunting impediment to finding funding, which is probably, you know, besides working your mission and making great things happen for the people in your community, that's it, right? You've got to find the money to support that. But let's just, you know, assuming that a leader of color can make her way to this perfect funding opportunity and finally get there, execution of the process is really the next hurdle, right? Because then she's going to be competing against white-led organizations who understand the nuances of an entrenched system to a T. Our nonprofit system is just another system, right? Of course, you know, I myself, our team, we're going to do everything we can to support and transition to our next leader, but still, it's enough to give a program pause, right? And so at the end of the day, what it comes down to us is really two things. Number one, we know that building a team that reflects the community is the right thing to do. We know that. And number two, when we have open conversations like this, it suggests to us that change is possible, that we're just talking about this openly. So we're intent on giving our families the best team that we can to support them. And we believe that the progressive efforts of people like Triangle Community Foundation that give us a chance to talk about this, it helps us to know that we're going down the right path, right? So again, really appreciate this chance to talk and share what our journey has been so far in, trying to put our team together and do the right thing for the people that we work with in Durham.
Thank you, Stacey, for being so open about that process and for sharing the thoughtfulness and intentionality behind those processes. Alex, will you kind of finish us off in this question about, some of the challenges that you've experienced?
Yeah, so I want to echo Monica. I really appreciate you for sharing your personal story with us and being vulnerable and inviting us into this space. And Stacey, to you to cast a vision about what you hope is true about StrongHER Together, and also for being honest about areas that you are considering that are challenging and what does that mean in decision making. I really admire you both and am honored to be on this panel with you. So I'm going to speak about my student U experience and was that Black person who followed a white leader in Durham and my experience with that. And I think that I've been thinking all weekend about what is the right thing to say and how do I speak about my experience in a way that honors the incredible founders of this institution and Dan Kimberg, who in a lot of ways set me up to be able to follow in his footsteps and taught me so much of what I know and made a lot of room for me and planned very strategically how the transition was going to happen. And I think one place that we missed is the impact of me being Black, right? And so I think there's a lot of ways that we plan for, here are the people you need to know, here's the work of being an ED, here's how you make strategic decisions, but not a lot of conversations. And I think it's both of our lack of knowledge at the time that I have unearthed as a reason of being in the role, right? And I'll use an experience to highlight what I mean, and then also use some data because I'm a bit of a nerd, and so I don't like to enter conversations without facts to explain the context in which we are talking about, right? That our individual experiences color the data, but the data speaks for itself, and the data is appalling. So 6 months into my role as the executive director of Student U, and I've been here for 11 years, and I think in Durham was a bit of a known quantity because I was our chief program officer and was always around with students and, often was within in conversations with funders or individual donors about the work because that's the work that I did. And I'm really grateful for having been in the institution. So I'd had some amount of history and was not an unknown quantity to people who have supported us for a long time. But 6 months after I was in ED, I ended up in a room with a funder and two other executive directors, both people of color. And one of those people said to me that his pain starting an organization around the same time that Dan did, and very much so felt like because Dan was a white man, had access to a lot of resources that enabled Student U to get off the ground and grow in the way that it did, and that he didn't have that experience. It was a moment that was a little tense. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to respond. I wasn't there. I was in college. This is not, leave me alone. Go talk to Dan. And also, I think also showed my own naivete, right? This man was like naming his pain in the space of we are people of color together. And I'm not sure if you've had this experience, but here's the reality of what it means to be in this role as a person of color. When we think about statistics, there's lots of work coming out right now about the challenges of people of color in gaining fundraising dollars, and particularly the impacts on women. So Vanessa Daniels, who runs this national grassroots fund that essentially puts money out to women of color who are doing change work in their communities. One of her studies says that 0.6% of philanthropic dollars in the United States is going to women of color. 0.6%. That's not 1, that's not 5, that's not 10, that's 0.6%. I have a lot of feelings about that reality. And I think when I think about Student U, my own experience, the reality is our work has evolved. We are getting more complicated in what we do and sophisticated. We're having more impact on our community. We manage this large building. There are constantly conversations with partners about us doing more. We currently serve about 1 to 3% of students who could benefit from our program. There are 33,000 students in Durham Public Schools. We want to do more, and yet our funding has declined and decreased since then has left the role, right? If you were to take all of the other stuff out, I was well prepared. I was doing the work. Thanks to the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Foundation, within the first 6 months of being ED, I went to this in-depth leadership academy, which really was a transformative experience for me that gave me more of the skills. But when you look at our funding, since Dan Kimber, our founder, incredible, brilliant human, has passed over the torch to a Black woman to lead this work, that funding has declined while the work has grown and the desire for us to have more impact continues to grow. I think that is, user experience is one, but within the context of national data, it is squarely in the mix of not only people of color not having access to the same amount of money, but women being even more marginalized in those conversations. And I think what we have to recognize is what is the impact of that. The impact is the bold visions that we have for our communities because of our proximity to the work do not get realized, right? If you ask me, Alex, what would you do with $5 million? I can tell you exactly what I would do because I sit all day and listen to our students and their parents and our community partners and sit in a neighborhood where we literally watch people sleep on the street because there isn't access to quality housing that's affordable in Durham, because our students are moving out of Durham because they can't afford to live here, because we're going into a school year where students are more likely not going to be in school all year in the traditional way. And the reality is that the most vulnerable students are Black and brown students and the needs that will come from that. I know exactly what we need to do, but I don't have the money to do it, right? And that is just Student U. That's not all the other organizations nationally nor in our community who are facing this reality. And where does the challenge come from? Stacey said all the right things. It's the network and the net worth of your network, right? So I know plenty of people. I like to talk. I'm social. I've been in Durham for a long time. I don't know anyone that can write Student U a $500,000 check. I love my people, and no one has hit it quite yet. I'm an immigrant, right? Like, I'm just 31. The reality is it is about the reality of structural racism and how that impacts Black and brown communities. And we do not often have people in our own networks who can be the people to anchor our institutions in the way that white leaders have access to networks that have that kind of net worth that they can invest in the organization, right? Even if you have access to that network, the other part of that, like Stacey said, who are the funders? What are your relationships with them? In one of the articles that I was talking about, they were clear of, one, often people of color don't have access to the intimate relationships with funders. But even if you know funders, that doesn't mean you have the kind of rapport where if you send an email, they're going to pick up the phone. And when you say, what I need is $50,000 to get that check. I sit on the board of other organizations, and I've heard of stories of like a board member calling a foundation person and getting the $50,000 check. I have not been in the position where that is happening to me on a regular basis, right? And so those are things that are keeping those disparities in funding. Another thing that people measure is, again, what is the process of writing all the grants? Who's reading the grants? What is the current flavor of foundations investments? And I don't mean that to be dismissive, but we know that foundations have specific goals and that the reality of the needs of our communities, that the needs are not changing, right? COVID-19 certainly heightened a reality, but there were children who could not be fed before COVID. There were families who were unemployed before COVID. There were Black and brown people who were dying at the hands of police before COVID. There was an inability to get the kind of job that would allow Black and Brown folks to be successful beyond college before COVID. There was health disparities before COVID. Black women were dying from, cancers and from birth before COVID. COVID has not changed the world. COVID has made it more clear that we need all of these services. And I think for me, my experience has been in some ways interesting because I am at the table, right? I actually can get access to the room, but the response to the need is not the same. And so what do you do with that is really challenging. And I think one of the last things that they say is what often happens is leaders of color end up leaving, right? That they can't meet the funding needs of their organizations, they feel too much stress, and then they quit. Like, well, I'm not able to do this work, therefore I'm going to resign, or potentially they're, fired from their boards and they do something else. And if we're going to be completely transparent, I've had conversations with my own board chair about maybe it's time for me to step down. Like maybe, though I'm sure we can say I'm excellent, but if we can't fund the vision, we can't do the work, and that's an important part of my job. How do we marry all of those realities? And again, I think Student U is well cared for, but if we look at the facts, those are the facts about the past 5 years. And the question is, what do we do from there? And I think that I've been encouraged in being able to be in conversations with foundations that are thinking more and more about this. I think we do have this opportunity in this moment to reckon with who do we want to be leading community work and who is the right leader of that work when most of that work that's happening is in communities of color. And if that's what we want, if we believe that the answers are within our own communities, then how does philanthropy change to meet that need? And how do also individual donors change to meet that need, right? Because it's not, the facts that I shared are mostly about foundations, but they also say that individuals follow the same trends, right? So it's not just, it's all of us collectively. How are we asking different questions? And how do these conversations that we're having lead to action, right? Lead to change that is sustained over time and not allow even this movement that we've just seen of all this money going to Black and Brown leaders, which I'm so grateful for, not be something that just happened for a month in June of 2020, but actually fundamentally becomes how we are funding the work moving forward, because these leaders were here before COVID and they will be here, continue to do the work in creative ways. But there's also a reality of like, we don't want leaders of color to become martyrs to the cause and, reduce their salaries and don't do this and don't do that, when there are other ways that we can ensure that they're also well cared for while doing the work so that they can be sustained to do this work for a very long time. Feels like this moment and opportunity that we have to educate ourselves and to make sure that we go beyond education to action and policies that leads to the change that we need, so that in 10 years we can all come back and say, remember when we had this conversation? Now the numbers in North Carolina are looking, representative. And that's going to take a lot of time. And it's going to take a lot of, I think, bold action that might be uncomfortable but necessary to make sure that our values and our visions are fully supported by our actions, which I think is the opportunity in front of us right now.
Thank you, Alex, so much for being so, real about your experience since you've stepped into the role of ED. I know all of you have faced challenges, and so I want to thank you each for being so vulnerable in this space. I think that these experiences lead really well into why it's important to give to organizations like y'all's. We recently had a donor share a quote about why she has prioritized nonprofits led by people of color, and I just wanted to share this quote with you all. So she said, "All my life I've been privileged. A few years ago, I became interested in local politics and met some African American friends. Through their friendship, I became a member of my local NAACP branch. At one meeting, we heard about the Racial Equity Institute, and I took a workshop. More recently, I was gripped by the New York Times 1619 Project. Now, I better understand how my privilege is at the expense of people who are denied in so many ways the advantages I have in so many ways. What makes me particularly sad and angry now is how COVID-19 has most stricken the people in this country who have been denied so much. It brings me joy to think that I can help give others to lift up and perchance help some to fulfill a dream. This came from an individual donor who wants to direct her individual or family funds to this cause. I also want to ask Valerie about the Triangle Capacity Building Network and what influenced their decision to prioritize people of color led and serving organizations and why others should do the same.
Yeah, thank you, Tanaya, and for your leadership in the network, and to our brave and fearless nonprofit executive directors. You all do continue to inspire and amaze us as the most creative and resourceful problem solvers and change agents that our communities need. And so we are grateful for your leadership. You know, I come to you today with many different identities at play, but a couple that I think I need to name are that I am a white female who works at a corporate foundation and sits at sort of the intersection of a lot of power and privilege, and yet power and privilege and my own lived experience. And so I think when we start talking about being a member of the Triangle Capacity Building Network and what the collective, the other funders, you know, there's 6 of us that are probably core members and many others that we're trying to influence and lead the way as we disrupt the status quo and as we try to show up differently, because I think it's pretty clear, you know, Stacey, you talked about shift happening and the shifts that we all need to be making. Monica, you really talked about, you know, making the invisible visible. And Alex, I mean, the call to action is pretty clear that we as funders have to change our behavior. We have to change the way that we've been doing things, because if we keep investing in the same way, and then we can't be surprised at the results that we're getting, right? So this has been by design. And so I think we have to name it, we have to get explicit. And I will say that the network has been a place where I think we can be bolder, and where collectively we have been able to lean in on some of these values that we have talked about for a long time. So the Capacity Building Network was created in 2014. We fell into a little bit of that funder privilege around commissioning some research, but also really asking questions and listening deeply, and really trying to understand what the capacity building landscape looked like here in the Triangle, and what would a stronger ecosystem be. And so we did commission research and asked a lot of questions, and you know, it was pretty clear in the research and the data, the fact that our nonprofit leadership is predominantly white-led, and that statistic hasn't changed in the past 10 years, let alone many more years. And it's not reflective of the population here in the Triangle, of the clients and communities that are being served. And so there's a lot of data points, and you know, we don't probably even, I mean, Alex, I think you said something about, like, I mean, the data, these are the facts. I think what we have to do is start really interrogating why this is, and own our place in, you know, the way that we've been perpetuating the problem. So lots of other data points that we can, you know, go into around Race to Lead, Building Movement Project, Echo Green, and again, we commissioned research from the NC State Institute for nonprofits. But really, as we as a network talked about building a diverse and effective nonprofit sector, the racial leadership gap just rises to the top, and our nonprofit leadership has to be representative of the communities served. We believe that. So the network was charged with moving from just conversation to action. So again, you know, how can we change the way that we're doing things? And so this inaugural funding to organizations led by and serving Black and Brown communities that we have traditionally excluded or overlooked because philanthropy, and you all named it really well, is very relationship driven. And, so all of us in the network have to talk about what relationships we have and what relationships we don't have. What are the barriers and the access, to equitable funding practices, and how can we, again, where are we doing harm and how can we change and do better? So the network has really been that place of boldness, of taking positions, and of really trying to take a stance that it's time to invest in our leaders of color. I will say this last round, $150,000, we may have been excited about that small step, but there is a lot more to do. And that's what, hopefully we can bring others along as we really examine what role we've had in producing these results, and really understand that change happens at the speed of trust. And the network and all of the other funding partners that I have, we've spent now many years in conversation building trust together, and really saying okay, our sphere of influence is not only my own institution, but collectively it's time to change, to trust, and to really invest differently.
Thank you, Val. No, I think you did a great job of articulating and summarizing kind of how the network got to where it is and why we think it's so important to invest in people of color led serving organizations. We know that there is a great need there, and we recognize that, these leaders have been shut out of opportunities. And so, we want to make it a priority to ensure that they have, all the resources and everything that they need to be the best leaders that they can for their organizations and for the community more broadly. So thank you, Val, for, shedding light on the Triangle Capacity Building Network. And again, thank you to all of you nonprofit leaders for the amazing work that you're doing within your organizations. So I think Julia has one more question for our nonprofit folks.
Yeah, so you all have touched on some of the challenges that you're facing, but I would love to hear, what are some of the really specific, few things that the work that you need to do now for your community that you're not able to do? And related to that, is there a way for community members, this has been a really inspiring conversation for me, and I hope for our listeners. And so as you're thinking about the work that you need to do now and you're not able to, are there ways for community members to plug into that? Stacey, I'm going to ask you to start us off with this one.
Yeah. As I think about some of the things that we need, they may sound a little more basic, but it's probably a reflection of where we are in our life cycle. One of the things that we found early on, the girls were all participating with group leaders in Zoom calls, and we could just see very quickly that they were not the girls that we were used to interfacing with. They were down, they were frustrated, they wanted this all to end. And so we had one of our youth representatives that sort of suggested that one of our groups do something with a book club. So a book was ordered for each of the girls in this group, and all of a sudden we start getting all of these messages from the girls, like some of them, as soon as the Amazon delivery guy leaves their driveway, oh, I got this book, and how does a book club work, and what do I do? And so we what we put together is Durham Girls Summer Book Club, where we're distributing books to girls in grades 5 through 8 all over Durham through all of the food distribution sites this summer. So we've already given out our first book. We'll be doing a total of 3. And so one of our near-term today needs is that we're hoping to see if we can round up another $3,000 to help us with our July and August order to get some more books to these girls. And we have a way, we're working on ways that they're connecting together and talking to each other. So it's kind of cool. They're from all over the place and they're reading the same book and talking about it. So that's one thing. If I look in the next year or so out, we are about to, we're in the planning stages of taking our very first inaugural group of girls on a trip to celebrate their 5-year anniversary in our program, to celebrate the fact that they'll be next summer getting ready to go into high school. And so that's kind of a big deal for us. Many of our girls have not ever been out of North Carolina. So it would be kind of cool if we could find a funding partner that would be excited about helping the kids, take that kind of trip and have that kind of experience to see someplace new, talk with women, mentors in other areas, and do some things with a sister program. And I alluded to this earlier in our talk today, but we're really hopeful that the future holds a place for us to call home one day. To this point, we have our activities all over Durham, but the older girls in our program especially see the need for a place to convene. We have an activity, they want to talk about it afterwards. We have some that we provide transportation for, so they take off on buses. Others go home with parents and guardians, and they want to be able to talk about something after we do it a little more easily than we can now. A place to make cards for hospitals or invite people to come in and speak to us. Our what we've always wanted to do is we would love to be in the Hayti district of Durham. Big Mac is one of our partners, part of our StrongHER Together family, and lots of times after the girls are dropped off from activities, he was born and raised in Hayti, so we'll drive around there and I guess kind of daydream together. but I mean, I don't know. I mean, our big dream is that if we could have like a center for girls and women over in that area one day, something that we could work towards, that would be kind of awesome. So anyway, those are a bit of some of the things we're looking at. Anything from a book for a girl in Durham to a place to call home. But you can learn more about our program and the book club and all of these things on our website. It's stronghertogether.org, StrongHER together.org. And you can kind of keep up with what we're doing in all kinds of social media ways as well, StrongHER Together. So again, thank you so much to Triangle Community Foundation for allowing us to just talk like this today. I mean, it's a real gift that you give us this opportunity, and we're going to keep trudging forward, hope for some good things ahead. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Stacey. One follow-up question is, what book are y'all reading right now for your book club?
Right now we're reading a book called Us in Progress, which is short stories of Latino young people. It was written by Lulu Della Cray. And then we'll also be reading in July Queen Bee and Me by Jillian McDunn. And then you shouldn't have asked me this question. I'm so excited.
No.
In August, we're going to be reading The Skin I'm In by Sharon Flake. And I have to tell you this thing that happened. So we put something on Instagram about that we were going to read this book in August. And so I just tagged Sharon Flake, So I just did that. Lo and behold, she reached out to me and she said, I think this is the coolest thing ever. And she said, I'm out of town, but I'm telling all my friends. Let me tell you, this happened on a Friday. She emailed me like 6 times during the weekend to say, okay, I think I've got 200 more. Somebody gave me 60. I'll put it in the system as soon as I get home. And by the end of the weekend, guys, she had raised for us $1,352 from all of her friends. And I mean, her friends were giving $6, $10. I mean, it's amazing yeah, share and play. The skin I'm in. Woohoo!
That's awesome. That's
Yeah, it was great.
Oh, cool. Oh, wow. Awesome.
Sorry you asked that question.
No, I'm not sorry I asked that question. That's great. All right, Alex, I'm going to ask you to go next and talk about what Student U needs to do right now and they can't do, and is there an opportunity for community members to plug in?
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Julie. I thought you'd never ask. I, obviously the resident comedian here, first want to say that I feel a lot of gratitude to Triangle Community Foundation and to the collective, the Capacity Building Collective, and for you, Valerie and Tanaya, for your leadership. I feel like throughout this process, you have consistently asked us, leaders and leaders of color, what do we need and what is our experience? And you have responded in a way that shows a humility and a way of validating what we've experienced and a desire to change. And it doesn't have to be that way. I think we can recognize that there is a power dynamic between the nonprofit who's in need of money and the person who's holding the bag, right? And we walk on eggshells to figure out what can we say and what can't we say and how might that impact our short and long-term relationships. But I've watched all of you in space, in rooms, being able to really pause and listen to our experiences, our triumphs, our pains, and to show up to the call and figure out what are the short-term wins that you can have as you continue to imagine what is radically different and might change the world around us. So I want to express my deep gratitude for your leadership and for continuing to allow us to be at the table and to also be part of helping you all imagine what could be different. So I'm really grateful for that. As far as Student U and needs in the short and long term, I'm going to talk short term and then long term first. So similarly to everyone in this moment, trying to really be mindful of what are the needs of our families right now, and at the same time, imagining what does recovery look like from COVID and how does that align with our own organizational priorities of what we anticipated we needed to do based on what we know about our communities. And again, wanting to highlight that for many of us, while COVID exacerbated some realities in our communities that were present before. And so if anything, it is for us clarifying the need to double down on what we've known we needed to do, and for ideas that we thought maybe in 5 years we will consider that, trying to be mindful about actually the time might be now to try to fundraise to do this work now because our families are in need of it. So at Student U, we always have an emergency fund that is available to all families up to $500 in order to help them with whatever life might happen that they do not have the funding for. And that fund typically has around $14,000 and makes it through the entire year. We are almost tapped out of that fund. I'm pretty sure if we're not already tapped, might be tapped by the end of next month and still have the rest of the year to go, which we imagine the need will continue to increase as the depth of this recession really settles and people who thought might be going back to work might find themselves permanently unemployed and needing to figure out what does it mean to stabilize housing? How do I feed my children, especially as we imagine a fall semester at least that might have more students at home than imagine at the beginning, and a hybrid model which moves some of those costs that typically go to the schools back to families. So what does that mean and how do we respond? So that's an immediate need. Every year, Student U for every student costs around $5,500 a year. And that enables us to provide our students with wraparound services all year, which include mental health services, which includes counselors, which includes summer programs, which includes after school programs. Really everything we do is wrapped up in that cost. And so for us, what we're in need of is consistent funders who are going to say, I'm gonna choose Student U as one of our organizations and we're gonna support, whether it's you choose a child and a family and commit for 11 years or every year, commit to some portion of that. I think what we know is that the healthiest, most thriving nonprofits have individual donors that make up between 60 to 70% of their budgets and who are giving year after year. And so really thinking about that gift as anchoring, not just for this moment, but in the long term, is something that I think Student U would benefit from, but I also know that all nonprofits in general benefit from. And so thinking about that. What we know we need to do that we haven't been able to fund are these ideas that I'm about to share, because Julia is so kind and asked us this question. So one, we know, and this moment continues to highlight that, financial oppression is a reality that has been in the US for a very long time. And how it presents itself is also multi-generational, right? That it's not just, we can't just isolate the child and think about the child without the child in the unit of the family. And so for us, a growth point that we've been imagining, that we've been dreaming about, and we know is necessary, is how do we journey alongside parents more closely? Particularly, how do we create pathways for parents who desire to go back to school, who desire to have access to more credentials, to be able to have access to those credentials so that they can get better paying jobs, right? We're in a moment where workforce development is going to become more and more necessary, not just for parents, but even for young people as they reimagine work. And we really want to be able to say, starting in the fall, we can bring on a social worker that can really lead our parent work and help all of our parents who have been displaced from jobs getting access to these credentials and the support they need to actually graduate from those programs. There's a very high rate of attrition because you can imagine that parents have families, they have jobs, they're trying to juggle all of that and often don't complete. And so having the resources in place to potentially provide some financial support to help parents focus on their schooling while participating in the credential program, as well as maybe academic support that they might need to finish. And for us, is a long-term play of that amount of schooling and the financial stability that will come from family as a result actually has impact on the educational outcomes of students. And so it's really a holistic strategy to continue to move not just our students, but our community forward. So that is an idea we've been dreaming about for a long time. We believe is necessary. And this moment in COVID has made that even more clear that we need it in order to support students and their families moving forward. Another big idea that we have is that we have this beautiful building, 55,000 square feet of space in the beautiful Haiti community. And we have this kitchen that is not yet renovated. We think has a lot of potential. It has the potential to be a place where we can teach. It has the potential where we can incubate Black and brown and women-led businesses from that space. It has the potential to increase our ability to rent out our own space, to generate revenue, to not just sustain the W.G. Pearson Center, but to be able to invest those dollars back into our community. To renovate that kitchen will be around $400,000 to $500,000. And this morning we visited the space with a potential partner. But again, the funding is an important part of making any dreams come true. I can tell you all my visions, but if it's not funded, they're just going to be on my sketch pad, and I'm going to keep, saying what they say in church, write a vision, make it plain, and then the provision is going to come. So I'm here with lots of visions. So those are things that will be helpful. And then the last thing, a dream that we haven't been able to realize, is really the W.G. Pearson Center coming to life in even a more enhanced way. And for that, we will need a director of community engagement that will help really harness and leverage the power of all of the institutions that are there. How can we do better work together? But also think about one of our paths is leadership and advocacy, and requires committed time to be able to support, equip, train our parents, our students, our community members to do more of that work, because we know that policies change the world. Programs are necessary because they help us manage the impact of the policies that create the conditions in which we need to live. And we want to be sure that we can be in organizations that both provides the programs in the now that families need, but can also push on policies that fundamentally change the conditions in our communities. And that position will allow us to allow the W.G. Pearson Center to live into that vision for our community, which is important to us. So in the short term, we have this fund, $5,500 a year, help us ensure that we have the funding to support all of our current families. And then our dream and reach points is to hire a new social worker, director of community and community engagement, and to invest in our kitchen that will enable us to increase our impact in our community.
Thank you, Alex. And I'll say Stacey shared how to get in touch with her organization. So I wanted to know if you wanted to take a second to share how folks can learn more about Student U or get in touch with you.
Absolutely. Our website is www.studentudurham.org. You can also find us on Facebook at Student U Durham, and you can find us on Instagram at Student U Durham, and you can find us on Twitter at Student U Durham.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex.
Well, thank y'all, everyone, for having this conversation. I feel like, I've heard a lot of people say like we have had opportunity to come to the table. So I feel like this is one of those tables where we get to have this open, candid conversation. When I think about what we need, if I can just be transparent to close this out for us, a leader is, when I think about an organization, I think about the leader and the leadership. And the organization is not as strong when the leader is carrying the load of every role, from ED to program director to volunteer coordinator to promotions to social media to all of the things. I was just able to bring an individual on board, to hire an individual on board to help with operations just within this year. Prior to that, it's been volunteers, it's been interns, and though I love my interns, EDs that are on this call, the dynamics of what that can look like and the strain of the additional training, professional development, so forth and so on. I have done what has probably been unhealthy, carrying that load, doing all the things, taking one part of my day to be ED, the other part to do volunteer coordination, the other part to do grants, and so forth and so on. And that is how I've had to move, along with just having a few hands as volunteers. What we need over the years, our organization has shifted. And so where we've gone from what the community thought was, oh, they're so awesome, they do art and summer camps, and that's great. No, that's not what we do. And our mission has never said that. What we do is we work with children who are witnesses of domestic violence and sexual abuse. And when you think about that dynamic alone, it's not just a summer camp where we're doing cute little art stuff. We are about education, we're about prevention, we are about healing. And that is what our organization is centered on. But we have not been able to bring our organization to the forefront to do the work that we are truly destined and designed to do, because it's just been the ED kind of holding up and a few volunteers. So when I think about what is it that we need, as our organization shifts into not just providing this fun free summer camp, but providing therapeutic services for survivors, providing therapeutic support groups for survivors, that changes the dynamics of the need, which means we need to bring licensed clinical social workers on board. We need to bring licensed therapists on board. And we need more skilled individuals that, as I said, though I love my volunteers and interns, we at this point need skilled individuals on our team so that we can do the work that we are designed to do. I love what Alex said earlier, this work that we've been doing was prior to COVID-19. COVID-19 has heightened, for us, it has heightened our referrals. We have received a referral over the last month. Every week, we've received at least one referral every week in the last 30 days. That's not what was happening prior to COVID-19. We don't have that capacity. So what's happening now is that we have to work off a waiting list, and then we have to pass this or outsource it to other organizations. And so what is it that we need right now? I'll give you a short term. What do I need right this moment? 50 donors that would be willing to become a recurring donor, giving anything between $50 to $100 a month for the next year. That's one on a short term basis. We need more recurring donors to sow into the organization to help us to sustain our services that we're offering right now. On a long-term basis, and I'm saying this long-term, but this is also immediate, we are in need to hire more skilled individuals. And what does that look like? as I'm here as the ED, we have an operations director, but we have these programs, which means my operations director spends a percentage of her time also overseeing the programs and the services that we have. And so her and I both are kind of juggling multiple, positions. We need social workers. We need a social worker. We need a therapist at this point. And we need an administrative assistant because trying to manage my own calendar can get challenging as well. So when I think about those things, like we're still growing as an organization, and we have yet to be able to truly bring forth the program. So I feel like we started as summer camp, fun stuff, but now we're shifting into what our mission says on our website. And that mission is around working with victims, working with survivors, and doing that work. And now we're getting those referrals in and multiple kids that we have on our caseload now that need our services, that are dealing with low self-esteem, that are dealing with the lack of confidence, depression, that have experienced trauma, that have experienced sexual abuse, and they need more services centered around more therapeutic services. And that requires us to have a clinical social worker or therapist on board. And that's what we need. So short term, I'm gonna go back so nobody missed. Short term, 50 people that want to become a recurring donor for Stand Up Speak Out. You can go right to our website, www.susonc.org. Come be on board, join our team. On the long term but immediate need basis, we are in need of having social worker, more skilled individuals that are working so that we can fulfill the mission that we are here to do, and that is to serve survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse, children who have witnessed domestic abuse. That is what we're here to do, and that is the work that we've been called to do.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you so much to the entire panel for your time today and sharing your experience, your challenges, your moments of pride, and just stories in general. We really appreciate all of you. You already shared your contact information, so thank you. And I hope that you all, our viewers and listeners, will be compelled to reach out, follow them on social, and just check them out and see what they're about. And I think that's it for today. So thank y'all.
I wanted to ask Val if Val has anything else she wanted to share. I know we gave everybody kind of a final moment, but Val, do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
I think the network is continuing to listen and learn and figuring out how to show up differently. And we hope to have another round of funding here that is flexible, that's going to meet people of color-led organizations where they're at and give them more, long-term flexible funding that enables them to continue these amazing bold visions and make them realities, which you're doing on a daily basis already. So just grateful for, again, your leadership, and we'll continue to be accountable to those we serve, which is here in the Triangle and beyond. But so I think that's the power of the network. You can find out more information also at the Triangle Community Foundation's website.
Thank you, Valerie.
Thank y'all for the opportunity.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you for being such wonderful partners to the foundation. Bye.
All right, take care.
Bye.